The elevator dropped hard enough to tear Lumi's low heels from the floor. Adrian Pierce caught her before her back struck the brass handrail, one arm locked around her waist as her palm flattened against his chest. The car shuddered upward again, stopped with a violent metallic groan, and opened 9 inches below the Calder House ballroom. Cold light and camera flashes poured through the doors. Victoria Lane stood directly outside in a structured silver gown, her composure breaking for only a second as photographers captured Adrian holding Lumi against him. "Mr. Pierce, is the engagement announcement still happening tonight?" "Victoria, did you know he was in there with her?" Adrian shifted toward the threshold. "Don't move," Lumi said. Her voice was low, but the command cut through the questions. The floor indicator trembled beneath the open doors. The car was still trying to level. "Everyone outside, step back. Now." Adrian went completely still. Lumi reached for the emergency phone. "Elias, do not reset the controller. Cut power to the full ballroom bank." A faint mechanical adjustment moved beneath her feet. 40 minutes earlier, the Calder House ballroom had been full of people pretending the evening was already a success. Waiters aligned champagne glasses beneath chandeliers. Municipal accessibility observers stood near polished display panels bearing the Pierce Axis logo. Investors moved through the room with the relaxed expressions of people who expected risk to belong to someone else. Lumi crossed the elevator lobby in a midnight blue dress chosen because it allowed her to kneel beside control panels without fighting the fabric. Her insurer-issued contractor badge was clipped visibly to the narrow black belt at her waist. The badge drew glances that her evening dress did not. It identified her as useful, temporary, and outside the room's hierarchy. She stopped in front of the center elevator. The interface had shown passenger mode when she approached. Then, for less than a second, the upper corner flashed the amber wrench symbol for inspection status. It disappeared before the gala manager noticed. Lumi touched the small gold pendant at her throat once, then lowered her hand. "Elias." The chief building engineer came over immediately. He was a broad-shouldered man with tired eyes and the alertness of someone who had learned that expensive buildings could fail in ordinary ways. "What did you see?" Passenger mode switched to inspection and back without a key command. "Pull the status history." He entered his code. The screen showed no active inspection request. "Could be a display artifact," the gala manager said. "Commissioning has produced a few visual ghosts." "A display that lies about operating state is not harmless," Lumi said. "Take the ballroom bank offline until we know whether the controller changed modes or only displayed one." The manager stared at the arriving guests. "We open in 30 minutes. Victoria Lane joined them, silver fabric catching the lobby light. "The integration layer has already passed commissioning. The interface just displayed a state no one requested." For less than a second. "That is long enough for the system to have believed it." Victoria's smile remained polished. "We cannot close the primary bank over a flicker." "We can," Lumi said. "You are choosing not to." A man in a black tuxedo approached from the ballroom. Lumi recognized Adrian Pierce from photographs, but the photographs had failed to capture his stillness. He moved without the restless adjustments common to people accustomed to attention. Dark brown hair, angular face, gray-green eyes that went first to the interface rather than to Victoria or Lumi. "Show me exactly what happened," he said. Lumi described the symbol, its position, and the duration. "Any relay noise?" he asked. "No." "Door hesitation?" "None I could measure." He looked at Elias. "Is the inspection input hardwired through the hotel controller or translated through the new compatibility layer?" "Translated." "Lane LCI 4.7? Lumi asked. Victoria answered before Elias could. "The same layer already deployed at 6 sites." Adrian studied the blank status screen. The state change should not occur. The gala manager exhaled with visible relief, mistaking diagnosis for dismissal. Adrian continued, "We reproduce it with an empty car." Lumi turned to him. "My recommendation is still shut down." "Understood. If you override that, I want it logged." Elias stays at the command center. "No guests use this bank. If the state repeats, we stop immediately." Adrian took the tablet Elias offered and signed his name beneath Lumi's written recommendation. "I'll ride with you," he said. "There is no reason for the CEO to be in the car. I designed the routing architecture. There is no reason to make a junior engineer accept a risk I authorized." That answer unsettled the judgment Lumi had already begun forming about him. Victoria looked toward the ballroom, where more cameras were gathering. Both announcements depend on this evening appearing controlled. Adrian did not ask which announcements she meant. He did not correct her. Lumi stepped into car B with her black folio under one arm. Adrian entered after her. The doors closed on the gold-lit lobby. The screen changed from passenger mode to inspection status. Then back. Lumi reached for the stop control. The car dropped. When the emergency lights replaced the chandelier glow, Adrian's arm was still around Lumi's waist. She kept the phone against her ear. "Confirm isolation." Elias's voice came through over alarms and distant shouting. "Main ballroom bank disconnect opening now." The car made another small, sickening lift. "Not just car B," Lumi said. "Every linked controller. I'm cutting all three." The overhead lights dimmed. Somewhere above them, a heavy electrical contact released. The elevator settled into absolute stillness. "Bank is isolated," Elias said. "Do not restart anything. The high-resolution buffer is volatile. A reset could overwrite the last 90 seconds. I'm creating an immutable image now." Only then did Lumi become aware of Adrian's breathing against the side of her hair and the hard line of his forearm across her waist. Her loosened hairpin hung by one strand. Her contractor badge had twisted sideways against her hip. "Are you steady?" he asked. "Yes." He released her at once. The absence of his arm felt colder than its presence had, but she ignored that. Elias and hotel staff secured a bridge plate across the misaligned threshold. Lumi tested it with one foot while gripping the interior rail. "Stable," she said. "One person at a time." Adrian stepped out after her. A scrape crossed his right knuckle where he had braced against the elevator wall. Victoria reached them before hotel security could establish a line. "What happened?" Reporters leaned closer. Adrian looked briefly at Lumi, then at the cameras. A contractor-directed diagnostic test produced an irregular stop. "The bank has been secured, and no conclusion should be drawn until the engineering review is complete." Every word was technically true. None of them said that Lumi had warned them before the test. None said she had prevented him from stepping across a moving threshold. None said she had preserved evidence that a reset would have destroyed. The photographers kept taking pictures of the moment his arm had been around her. "Can one car reopen for the gala?" the manager asked. "No," Lumi said. "The full bank remains closed." Victoria's eyes sharpened. "That will affect closing week." There it was, the larger structure hidden behind Adrian's carefully chosen sentence. The insurer called Lumi before hotel staff finished redirecting guests. Separate findings would be required from her and Pierce access before any elevator returned to service. Adrian adjusted his creased sleeve. "You'll have full access to our technical records." Lumi straightened her twisted badge. "Full access is not the same as full truth." The building command center had been designed for 6 people and held 14. Screens covered one wall. Radio traffic overlapped with calls from the ballroom, the service lifts, and hotel security. Guests in formal clothing were being diverted towards stairwells they had not expected to use. One staff member suggested routing everyone through the nearest exit corridor. That corridor narrows past the coat check, Lumi said. Anyone using a cane, anyone carrying a child, anyone in unstable shoes will slow the entire flow. Open the west stairwell and place staff at both turns. Do not tell people merely to follow the signs. The signs conflict with the temporary barriers. The gala manager looked at Adrian. Adrian said, "Do it." Lumi and Elias marked routes on the building plan. They moved decorative stanchions away from the stair entrances and assigned one service lift to guests who could not use stairs, with a building engineer stationed inside. At the command table, Victoria placed a slim tablet in front of Lumi. "We need a concise insurer statement," she said. "Pierce Axis and Calder Engineering will handle technical causation." Lumi read the proposed division of responsibilities. "My contract gives me independent access to all systems and records relevant to occupant behavior and emergency egress." This was an elevator control event. It became an occupant behavior event the moment the doors opened below the floor. The contract was not written for an acquisition launch. It was written for an insured building. Adrian stood across the table, his scraped knuckle now covered by a narrow adhesive strip from the first aid kit. "She gets the access," he said. Victoria's jaw tightened. "On what basis?" "Contractual process." Lumi looked at him. Again, he had defended the result without naming why it mattered. She had seen that habit before, the private acceptance of a person's judgment, followed by public language soft enough to make the judgment disappear. A hotel manager pointed toward a folder of interface screenshots. "Some of these are confusing. We should remove duplicates before sending anything out." "No deletion," Lumi said. "They're only screenshots. They are part of the operator environment. Preserve every image, every display state, every radio instruction, and every decision made in this room." Her voice fell rather than rose. The room quieted around it. Adrian looked at the manager. "Preservation order." "Nothing is altered." His phone rang. He answered near the wall, but Mara Quinn's voice carried faintly through the speaker. "The acquisition agreement has a material adverse event clause. Markets open in less than 12 hours. Public speculation must be controlled before then." Adrian's gaze moved toward Lumi, then to the screens showing the dark elevator bank. "I understand." Elias called them over. On his monitor, the raw event log displayed two mode instructions separated by 1.8 seconds. "One came from the hotel controller," he said. "The other came through a compatibility layer." For the next hour, the command center emptied until only Lumi, Adrian, and Elias remained at the central table. Adrian removed his bow tie and opened his collar. He did not send an engineer to explain the routing logs. He entered his own credentials and exposed the raw Pierce Axis data. "That file includes unreleased architecture," he said. "Then you understand why a legal summary would not be sufficient." "I do." They reconstructed the sequence second by second. At 7 hours 4 minutes and 51 seconds, Carby received a passenger routing request. At 7 hours 4 minutes and 53 seconds, the doors remained open beyond the standard laboratory interval. At 7 hours 4 minutes and 54 seconds, Lane Compatibility Patch LCI 4.7 sent an inspection mode call. At 7 hours 4 minutes and 55 seconds, Pierce Axis Routing Release PA 9.3 continued the passenger sequence rather than rejecting the contradiction. At 7 hours 4 minutes and 56 seconds, the car moved. Adrian leaned closer to the screen. The repeated handshake begins after the door delay. "The delay did not begin with my manual command," Lumi said. That is one possibility we have to test. It was reasonable engineering language. It also placed her action near the center of suspicion. Lumi pulled the ballroom camera footage onto the adjacent monitor and synchronized it with the door load sensor. Here. The sensor registered a longer open interval before her hand reached the stop control. Adrian watched the images frame by frame. You had not touched it. No. What held the door? Nothing. The controller extended it. Why? That is the wrong first question. He looked at her. The first question is whether the duration is abnormal for a real passenger. Someone stabilizing a cane. Repositioning a mobility device. Retrieving a dropped bag. Waiting for another person to clear the threshold. The lab default assumes continuous boarding. Buildings do not contain lab defaults. They contain people. His attention sharpened. Not defensive. Interested. Lumi could feel the heat of his shoulder beside hers in the cramped room, but the closeness had no softness yet. It was concentration made physical. Adrian opened the patch integration correspondence. One message showed Lane requesting accelerated deployment before the gala. Another showed Pierce Axis accepting reduced field testing time in exchange for post-launch monitoring. Adrian sat back. You approved this? Lumi asked. The schedule, yes. Not the reduction in accessibility scenarios. But your system accepted the result. He did not hide behind the distinction. Yes. Elias quietly saved another verified copy of the correspondence. The failure was no longer an isolated mechanical event. It was an assumption about human behavior, inserted into a system designed to keep people safe. Near 11, Lumi left the command center to walk the routes guests had actually used. The ballroom had thinned to staff, technicians, and a few donors unwilling to admit the evening had ended. Decorative stanchions blocked half the west stairwell. Illuminated arrows directed people toward a corridor that temporary barriers closed 20 feet later. Adrian followed with his tuxedo jacket folded over one arm. The routing software sent the west stair instruction correctly, he said. And what happened when people reached it? They saw the barrier. They saw 3 instructions. The screen told them west. The barrier pointed east. A staff member told them to use the service corridor. The system cannot control temporary decor. It controls whether people trust the next instruction. At the first landing, Lumi slowed deliberately. Walk at this pace. Adrian matched her. Slower. He adjusted without argument. A woman in narrow formal shoes ahead of them gripped the rail and took each step carefully. Behind her, 8 people compressed into the turn. Lumi said, Your evacuation model assumes the route is available because the door is open. Human availability is different. They continued at the woman's pace. At the lower level, the fallback plan directed mobility-limited guests back toward the ballroom elevator bank. Adrian stopped at the map. That bank was assumed to remain partially available. All 3 cars share the same compatibility layer. He took out his phone and called Pierce Axis Operations. Suspend the same fallback configuration at Calder North and St. Vincent Annex immediate review. No, do not wait for full causation. Mark it as a precautionary operational hold under my authority. When he ended the call, Lumi studied him. You will disrupt 2 sites on an unconfirmed mechanism. I will not leave the same assumption active while we test it. He had changed an operational decision because of her reasoning. There were no cameras present, and no one had asked him to demonstrate leadership. The attraction arrived quietly, almost inconveniently. It had nothing to do with the tuxedo or the hand that had caught her. It came from watching a powerful man allow evidence to alter him before certainty made the alteration comfortable. Mara called again as they crossed the empty ballroom. Adrian listened for nearly a minute. If we publicly link Lane's patch before joint review, he said afterward, they may withdraw from the acquisition. Lumi had heard only his final response to Mara. I understand what it costs. She wondered who he believed he had the right to charge. They went to the rooftop mechanical level after midnight. Lumi buttoned her black wool coat over the midnight blue dress and removed the loosened hairpin rather than trying to repair it. Her chestnut waves fell around her shoulders, caught immediately by the lake wind. The roof was lightly iced. Adrian carried his jacket instead of offering it to her, which she appreciated. Courtesy did not require assuming she had failed to dress for the weather. They inspected the interface cabinet beneath a metal overhang. The wind pressed their words back at them, forcing them to stand closer to hear. Lumi checked the cable labels. I need an answer that is not technical. Adrian waited. Is Victoria your fiancé? His expression changed less than most people's would have, but she saw the calculation end. No. Formerly? No. We have never been romantically involved. Then why did 3 reporters ask about an engagement while I was standing in an elevator with your arm around me? Because the rumor benefits the acquisition. The wind moved between them. You allowed it. Yes. Why? Investors believe the deal is less likely to fracture if they think Victoria and I are personally committed to it. That is not an answer. It is a mechanism. He looked through the rooftop glass toward the ballroom below. 6 years ago, Pierce Axis nearly collapsed. I believed I could solve the funding problem without giving up control. I waited too long. By the time I accepted outside financing, we had to dismiss most of the original engineering team. How many employees do you have now? 218. And the acquisition protects them? It stabilizes the company. It funds the municipal accessibility rollout. Hospitals and public buildings are waiting on installations they cannot finance alone. So you let people believe you are marrying Victoria because the belief keeps financing calm. I carry the consequences of that decision. Lumi looked directly at him. No. Everyone affected by the lie carries them. You are only the person who decided they were affordable. His jaw tightened, though his voice remained controlled. I am trying to protect people who depend on an outcome. By deciding what truth they can survive. Sometimes leadership requires absorbing a moral compromise. Absorbing it would mean the cost stopped with you. He said nothing. Lumi's fingers brushed the pendant beneath her coat. She lowered her hand before the movement became a habit. A former employer accepted an evacuation recommendation from me, she said. After the danger passed, he told the public I had been alarmist. He kept the benefit of my judgment and removed my authority from the story. Adrian's gaze returned to her. At the gala, she continued, you trusted my command while the elevator was moving. Then the moment the cameras turned on, I became a contractor whose test produced an irregular stop. I was trying to prevent speculation before we had evidence. You prevented facts that were already known. The wind rattled the metal housing above them. I should have credited what you did, he said. Yes. No absolution followed. She would not make honesty easier by rewarding its first appearance. I will give you every technical record, he said. Even if it damages the deal. Evidence access is the first decision, Adrian. It is not the final one. They went downstairs without touching. At 5:30 Friday morning, Lumi returned to the command center after coffee and 20 minutes alone in an unused office with her eyes closed. Adrian had rested elsewhere. His shirt collar remained open, his bow tie gone. Elias had prepared an offline simulator disconnected from every rail elevator control. Lumi aligned 4 timelines, door open duration, passenger load, interface states, and routing commands. We keep trying to reproduce the gala test, she said. That assumes the test was the meaningful behavior. What do you want to change? Adrian asked. The human delay. She programmed a sequence in which a passenger dropped an object near the threshold. No failure. She added a pause to stabilize another passenger. The system logged a warning but rejected the conflict. She extended boarding time to match the interval typically needed for a mobility device to enter, turn, and clear the door sensors. At 1.8 seconds beyond the laboratory default, LCI 4.7 requested inspection mode. PA 9.3 continued the passenger routing sequence. Both commands remained active. The simulated car produced the same abrupt brake request and releveling loop recorded in car B. Elias leaned toward the monitor. There it is. Lumi ran the sequence again with a different delay. Same result. She pulled up the manual input timestamp from the gala. Her test command arrived after the conflict had already begun. The test did not create the instability, Adrian said. No. But do not write this as a lane-only defect. The patch sent the contradictory command. And PA 9.3 accepted it. A safety system should reject incompatible states. He studied the code path. We designed for command competence from verified integration layers. You designed trust where you needed refusal. The sentence landed between them with more than technical meaning. Adrian turned to Elias. The bank stays offline. Written authority from me, regardless of gala pressure. Begin internal testing on every installation using LCI 4.7 with PA 9.3. He opened an incoming public statement draft. Lumi saw the phrase operator-associated instability before he deleted it. He did not replace it with the full mechanism. Not yet. While the simulator generated verified outputs, Adrian brought breakfast from the staff kitchen. No silver covers. No executive tray. 2 paper plates with eggs, toast, and fruit, along with unsweetened tea for Lumi. You remembered, she said. You declined sweet coffee twice. They sat beside the closed ballroom, where pale light had begun to reach the lake-facing glass. Adrian flexed his bandaged hand. Does it hurt? She asked. Yes. The direct answer surprised a small smile from her. The bandage is loose. Do you want help? He held out his hand. Lumi removed the strip carefully. The scrape was shallow but raw across the knuckle. She cleaned it with a wipe from the first aid packet and placed a new bandage over it. His hand remained still beneath hers. He did not turn the contact into something else. I did not only fail to save those jobs, he said. I delayed telling the team how little funding remained. Lumi finished smoothing the bandage. Why? I wanted to spare them panic while I found a solution. And some would have left earlier if they had known. Yes. They lost that choice. She released his hand. Silence can remove a person's ability to protect herself, she said. Kind intentions do not return the choice. I know that now. You understand it as a memory. I am asking whether you understand it as a current method. His eyes held hers. What would repair the gala statement? He asked. Public accuracy. About your role. About everything you already know. And stop using my name, my silence, or private trust as something that stabilizes your company. I have never used your silence. Victoria is preparing to. He looked toward the dead elevator bank. The engagement rumor makes every decision appear compromised, he said. Yes. I am going to correct it before the technical findings are released. Lumi lifted her tea. And after that? For once, Adrian had no controlled answer ready. Lumi went home to shower, change, and complete her preliminary report. She wore charcoal trousers, an ivory blouse, low black boots, and her camel coat when she returned to Calder House. At 9:30, she watched Adrian's scheduled investor call on a muted newsroom feed. He wore a dark navy suit without the Pierce Axis lapel pin. Victoria sat 2 chairs away in pale gray. Mara, in charcoal, had a legal pad open before her. Lumi read the live transcript rather than relying on tone. Before the call, Victoria had apparently argued that correcting the rumor would signal instability. Mara's written note, later added to the record, stated that correction was legally optional but that further delay would make later disclosure appear manipulative. Adrian faced the camera. "Victoria Lane and I are not engaged," he said. "Our relationship is professional." There was no personal announcement planned for the Calder House gala. A reporter asked whether the rumor had been invented by the press. "No," Adrian said. "I was aware of the assumption and did not correct it. That was my decision." Victoria's stillness looked sharpened into a weapon. Within minutes, acquisition speculation moved across the market feed. Lane postponed a joint statement and issued a demand that no technical findings be released before legal review. Elias stood beside Lumi. "That cost him," he said. "Yes. It was real, but limited." Adrian had corrected the falsehood that threatened his personal reputation. The safety record remained unresolved. Lumi returned to her report. She described the probable patch conflict, PA 9.3's unsafe acceptance of contradictory commands, her pre-gala warning, and the need for continued testing. She attached her name prominently. At 10:43, she submitted it to the insurer. A message from Adrian arrived 1 minute later. "May I speak with you before legal review begins?" Lumi answered, "Glass conference room at Calder." 11:15. Public workplace. Clear exits. No private hotel room that could blur the nature of the conversation. Adrian arrived without an assistant. By then his tie had been removed, though nothing else about him appeared disordered. Beyond the glass walls, the closed ballroom looked washed in pale winter light. "I did not correct the rumor because I expected anything from you," he said. "I know. I still do not know whether I can preserve Pierce Axis, the municipal rollout, and complete disclosure at the same time. Uncertainty is more honest than a controlled promise." His mouth shifted slightly, not quite a smile. Lumi placed her folio on the table. "My preliminary report is filed. I will not delay the final report, soften it, or route it through your legal team. I am not asking you to." "Good." Silence settled, but it was not empty. The emergency had ended. Both were sober. The door stood open. Neither controlled the other's work. Adrian moved 1 step closer. "May I kiss you?" Lumi held his gaze. "If either of us leaves this room, our work remains unchanged." "Yes." "My report remains unchanged." "Yes." "Then you may." He touched her face with a care that felt more intimate than urgency would have. The first kiss was restrained, warm, and brief enough that she could have ended it without explanation. When he began to step back, Lumi caught the front of his shirt lightly and closed the distance herself. The second kiss carried choice rather than surprise. His hand settled at her waist only after she moved closer, and even then it rested rather than held. When they separated, Adrian's forehead nearly touched hers. "One honest act does not purchase silence about the next one," Lumi said. "I understand." Their phones sounded at almost the same moment. Lane's legal team disputed Lumi's authority to initiate the controlled test. The email demanded review of all public attribution and described the elevator event as potentially resulting from a procedure outside normal commissioning operations. Adrian read at once. "They cannot truthfully call the test unauthorized." I signed it. Lumi picked up her folio. Then the question is whether you will say that when it costs something. They did not meet privately over the weekend. The ballroom elevators remained shut down. Insurers reviewed the logs. Pierce Axis engineers tested parallel installations. Lane prepared its response. On Monday morning, freezing rain began ticking against the Calder House windows. Victoria stood at the end of the executive meeting table in a severe silver-gray suit. A presentation behind her displayed a clean sequence of timestamps. The first entry showed Lumi and Adrian entering car B. Everything before that had been removed. No interface flicker. No shutdown recommendation. No accelerated lane deployment. No written authorization. The test was described as occurring outside the normal launch schedule. The language did not explicitly call it unauthorized, but the implication filled the room. Elias leaned forward. The controller state before the test is part of the incident. Engineering causation remains disputed, Victoria said. The public statement should include confirmed operational events. The warning is confirmed, Lumi said. The warning reflects interpretation. The interface changed modes without a command. For less than a second. Lumi looked at the slide. You have begun the timeline at the point most useful to you. Victoria placed a document beside Lumi. You can remain credited as the human factors advisor if you acknowledge that technical cause is undetermined and that your shutdown recommendation was precautionary. It was fault-based. You had not reproduced the fault. I had observed an unstable operating state. Mara spoke from Adrian's right. Her tone carried no pressure, only consequence. Full disclosure may trigger Lane's termination rights. Pierce Axis could face recall obligations, lender action, municipal suspension, and an immediate board review of Adrian's position. Victoria looked at Adrian. We can protect the acquisition without making a false statement. Lumi turned to him. Silence during the briefing will function as endorsement. Adrian's expression closed into the stillness she now understood too well. I will not approve the phrase unauthorized test, he said. Victoria removed it from the slide. But I will not authorize full technical disclosure before the board meets. The room became very quiet. Victoria replaced the phrase with outside diagnostic procedure. The implication survived untouched. At 1 p.m, the press area filled beside the brass and black glass elevator bank. Lumi wore a tailored charcoal suit, white blouse, black boots, and her camel coat over one arm. Her contractor badge remained visible at her waist. Adrian wore a navy suit and the Pierce Axis lapel pin. Victoria began with prepared remarks. An outside contractor initiated a diagnostic procedure outside the launch schedule. The elevator malfunction occurred after that procedure began. Subsequent public attention has focused on a private image involving Mr. Pierce and the contractor, which has unfortunately distorted the technical review. Camera shutters began again. The same lights. The same elevator doors behind them. No moving threshold this time to justify why Lumi stood exposed while Adrian occupied the safer side of the story. A reporter raised his voice. Did Lumi Hart exceed her authority? Another asked, does Mr. Pierce's personal involvement compromise the investigation? Adrian stepped to the microphone. The diagnostic test was not unauthorized, he said. Lumi waited. The investigation remains incomplete. All actions are under review, and no individual has been formally cleared. The answer refused Victoria's direct accusation. It also refused to say that he had approved the test. That Lumi had warned them. That the controller conflict had begun before her manual input. His neutrality preserved acquisition flexibility and left her standing beneath a story he knew was false in its shape. The cameras turned toward her. Lumi did not argue at the microphones. Anger would become distraction. hurt would become proof of private involvement. A long explanation would be reduced to one defensive sentence. My full report will contain the complete pre-incident timeline and the verified controller data, she said. Then she walked away. Adrian followed as far as the adjoining corridor. Lumi. She turned. A direct answer would have triggered Lane's termination rights before I could protect the employees or the municipal project. She smoothed one cuff, felt the old gesture beginning, and lowered her hand. You do not get to trust me in locked rooms and question me under lights. I did not question you. You allowed a known false implication to stand. I prevented them from calling the test unauthorized. You protected me from the sentence you helped make possible. His face changed. You call it neutrality because the damage is happening to someone else, she said. To the person under the lights, it is an accusation. I am trying to hold the company together long enough to make a responsible decision. You already made one. He stepped no closer. What are you going to do? I am withdrawing from all direct work with Pierce Axis. I will complete the Calder House assignment through the insurer and the municipal regulator. Elias can provide building access under hotel authority. You do not need to leave the investigation. I am not leaving the investigation. I am leaving the arrangement that allows you to value my judgment privately and reduce it publicly. She did not ask him to choose her. She would not turn public safety into a romantic test. In the command center, Elias watched her upload the complete report. It included her original shutdown recommendation, Adrian's signed authorization, the immutable log image, the simulator reconstruction, the Lane deployment correspondence, the human factors findings, and the selective timeline presented that morning. She sent it to the insurer and municipal regulator. Then she removed the temporary Pierce Axis access credential from behind her contractor badge and placed it on the table. Her insurer identification remained inside her folio. Her professional authority did not depend on Adrian's company. He stood near the door while she closed the files. He did not touch her, block the exit, request a delay, or ask for one more private conversation. At the hotel entrance, freezing rain silvered the pavement. I understand, he said. Lumi put on her camel coat. You understand the words. What matters is what you do when I am not there. She stepped into the rain. That evening, Lumi worked from home beneath the warm circle of a desk lamp. The municipal authority sent formal notice of an expedited safety hearing. Her report and the original log hashes had been accepted into the record. An hour later, another notification arrived. Pierce Axis had issued a company-wide preservation hold covering engineering files, executive communications, patch testing, authorization decisions, and acquisition correspondence. Adrian's own communications were explicitly included. Lumi read the notice twice. She did not treat it as an apology. Over the next several hours, copied legal documents entered the case record. Adrian rejected Lane's proposed statement assigning primary responsibility to Lumi's test. He provided the board with his signed override. He directed Pierce Axis engineers to answer regulators without executive pre-screening. He suspended affected installations before the city ordered him to do so. Victoria's response was attached to one filing. Lane would terminate the acquisition if raw data became public. The board minutes summarized the final alternative offered to Adrian. Preserve the deal. Describe causation as unresolved. Allow outside parties to dispute Lumi's authority. Mara's memorandum listed the likely consequences if he refused: acquisition collapse, recall costs, municipal delay, lender scrutiny, removal as CEO, and substantial loss of equity. Adrian did not contact Lumi. No message appeared asking whether she had seen the preservation hold. No request came for reassurance, forgiveness, or softer testimony. Lumi prepared for the hearing using evidence rather than hope. Before midnight, the published agenda listed Adrian as the first company witness. He had requested permission to submit the complete raw data archive. The following Thursday was clear, bright, and intensely cold. Lumi wore a slate blue dress beneath a black wool coat to the municipal hearing. Reporters crowded the stone steps. Accessibility observers filled 2 rows behind the council tables. Adrian entered in a plain charcoal suit. No Pierce access pin. He carried a printed binder and a sealed data drive himself. When called, he took the witness seat and placed both on the table. The submission includes the raw controller archive, verification hashes, simulator outputs, patch correspondence, Ms. Hart's shutdown recommendation, and my written authorization to proceed with the controlled test, he said. The hearing chair asked him to summarize responsibility. Adrian looked toward the officials, not toward Lumi. Lumi Hart identified an unstable operating state before the gala and recommended that the ballroom elevator bank be taken offline. I overrode that recommendation and authorized a controlled test. Pens moved across the table. After the car malfunctioned, he continued, Ms. Hart prevented occupants from crossing a moving, misaligned threshold. She ordered the linked bank powered down and stopped a reset that would have overwritten volatile event data. Her reconstruction of the failure mechanism was correct. The room became so still that Lumi heard the heating system engage above them. The Lane LCI 4.7 compatibility patch sent a contradictory mode request after a realistic boarding delay. Pierce Access Release PA 9.3 failed to reject that contradiction safely. Lane accelerated deployment. Pierce Access accepted the schedule and retained responsibility for system behavior. Victoria sat motionless near the end of the table. I also allowed launch and acquisition pressure to affect my public statements, Adrian said. My previous descriptions did not accurately credit Ms. Hart's warning or actions. That omission was mine. The hearing chair asked what corrective measures Pierce Access proposed. We are voluntarily suspending every affected installation. Independent testing will proceed under municipal oversight. The lane acquisition will be terminated rather than preserved through a statement that misrepresents the incident. A stir passed through the reporters. Adrian continued. A substantial portion of my equity will be committed to the recall and testing fund. Customers relied on systems my company delivered. The cost should not be transferred to them. During the recess, the Pierce Access board removed him as CEO. Mara told the hearing that he would remain eligible only for a supervised engineering role under external oversight. The municipal accessibility rollout would be delayed until validation was complete. When Lumi testified, she did not soften a sentence. She explained the interface flicker, the test conditions, the preserved data, the human delay trigger, the lane patch conflict, and PA 9.3's unsafe command acceptance. She included Adrian's responsibility exactly as she had before he disclosed it himself. The hearing was not a place to reward him. Outside the room, their eyes met across a corridor full of cameras. Adrian did not approach. He left with Mara and the external oversight team. One costly act could be a transformation. It could also be a moment. Lumi needed time to know the difference. 6 weeks later, late winter snow melted in gray ridges along the Chicago curbs. Lumi returned to Calder House wearing black trousers, a cream sweater, weatherproof boots, and her pendant beneath the collar. Her insurer assignment would end only if the restored ballroom bank passed human factors certification. The new control architecture rejected contradictory commands instead of holding both states. Door timing adapted to varied boarding needs. Interface warnings used plain language and distinct visual priorities. Patch validation had been separated from host system approval. Evacuation routes had been tested with people using mobility devices, canes, service animals, and assisted boarding. Adrian was present in dark trousers, a pale shirt, and a simple work jacket. He stood among the engineers rather than at the head of the room. When Lumi asked why one warning remained delayed by half a second, he answered directly. That was my preferred configuration. The independent tester rejected it because the delay could be misread during a crowded evacuation. The current setting is theirs. No defensiveness. No attempt to make the overruled decision sound collaborative after the fact. Lumi reviewed 6 weeks of remediation records. Adrian had continued weekly disclosure after the hearing. He had approved tests beyond the regulator's minimum. Twice, he had corrected public reports that understated Pierce access responsibility. None of the records used Lumi's approval as evidence of company reform. None mentioned their private relationship. During the final live test, Lumi entered Car B with Elias and 2 independent testers. Adrian remained at the command station. Extended boarding delay, Lumi said. The doors stayed open while one tester simulated repositioning a mobility device. The interface displayed adaptive boarding in clear white text. No inspection request appeared. The doors closed. The car rose smoothly and stopped exactly level. They repeated the test with a dropped object, an interrupted route instruction, and a contradictory maintenance signal. Each unsafe command was rejected. Back in the command center, Lumi signed the certification with monitoring requirements and a 90-day audit condition. Elias countersigned. Your insurer assignment is formally complete, he said. Adrian waited until Lumi closed her folio. Would you consider one real date? No declaration. No polished promise. No suggestion that 6 weeks of correct behavior entitled him to an answer. Lumi studied him. What would you do if another camera appeared and the truth threatened something you loved? He did not answer quickly. I would tell the truth early enough for other people to make their own choices. She believed he understood the words now. More importantly, she had seen what he did when she was not there. One date, she said. Relief moved through his face without becoming triumph. After the reopening? Yes. I can meet you away from the press entrance. No. Lumi picked up her coat. Use the front door. That evening, Calder House reopened on a smaller scale. There were fewer chandeliers lit, fewer investors, and no suggestion that elegance required hiding the building's safety systems. Evacuation maps stood clearly beside the ballroom doors. Accessibility information appeared on the main displays rather than inside technical menus. Snow had begun again beyond the glass. Lumi entered through the front doors wearing a burgundy long-sleeved dress and low black heels. Adrian waited beside the same elevator bank in a plain dark suit. No tuxedo. No company pin. No staff position to shield him from the photographers near the ballroom entrance. Car B arrived. The doors opened. Its floor aligned perfectly with the brass seam of the ballroom. Lumi looked down. Professional habit. Evidence before reassurance. Adrian noticed, but he did not tease her. He did not tell her the elevator was safe. He left the judgment to her. Behind him, cameras were already lifting. He held out one open hand. He did not step toward her. He did not reach for her waist. He did not guide her across the threshold. Lumi looked at the level seam. Then at the cameras. Then directly at Adrian. She placed her hand in his and stepped out of the elevator. They crossed into the ballroom together. Adrian began to loosen his fingers, giving her the choice to let the gesture end. Lumi held on. A reporter called her name. Miss Hart, are you and Mr. Pierce together? Adrian turned toward Lumi instead of answering for her. She felt the warmth of his hand, the open elevator behind them, and the old image of his arm around her waist while the floor moved beneath their feet. This time, nothing was holding her there. We are beginning with one honest date, she said. Then Lumi rose onto her toes, drew Adrian toward her, and kissed him beneath the cameras. Behind them, the elevator remained open and perfectly level with the ballroom floor. Snow moved beyond the glass, and her burgundy sleeve rested against his plain dark suit as she kept his hand in hers by choice.